Today, we are looking at, well, a hyper detailed survival manual for the modern human soul.
Which sounds pretty intense, right?
Right, but the catch is that it is entirely disguised as a fantasy epic about a made up continent that does not actually exist.
Yeah, it's wild.
It really is. So, we are tackling a stack of sources you provided centered around this deeply fascinating, highly esoteric text known as the Book of Masdaq.
And, to any casual observer just flipping through the pages, it reads like a massive sweeping mythology. I mean, we are presented with this alternative universe called the Autherens.
Complete with intricate maps of a continent named Tarawan.
Right? Exactly. And incredibly complex political and religious dynamics within a nation called Calcia. Like we get seers, tyrants, desert treks, and clashing empires.
But looking through your notes, it becomes obvious pretty quickly that this isn't just world building for the sake of entertainment.
Oh, absolutely not.
The author is using this fictional universe as a mirror for our very real everyday existence. So the goal for this deep dive is to look past that surface level lore and extract the psychological and spiritual framework hidden inside.
Because it really is a serious guide for personal transformation.
Yeah, for leadership and finding your true identity. To do that, we're going to track the life of the text's central seer, a figure named Zutun Barg, and pull out the specific tools he uses so you can apply them to the complexities of your own life right now.
So we meet Zutun Barg when he is 32 years old, living in his home city of Butterchuck.
Okay.
And he is fundamentally dissatisfied. He has been raised in these rigid, inherited traditions.
The text calls them the Muscatad faith and Ugorsianism, right?
Yes, exactly. But for our purposes, you can just think of these as the heavy, unyielding expectations of his family, his culture, and his society. They just do not fit him.
He feels out of place.
Completely unsuited to the life he's been handed. So at 32, he decides to walk away. He leaves his home, his city, his familiar life. And the text gives the specific act of departure a name, Desuma.
I have to admit, looking at the concept of Desuma initially, I wanted to push back a little bit.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because on the surface, doesn't this just sound like, a glorified way of saying he ran away from his problems?
Right.
Like things get tough, you feel suffocated by your hometown or your job, so you just pack a bag, ghost everyone, and disappear.
It completely sounds like pure escapism until you look at the highly specific prerequisites the text demands.
Right, because there are rules to this.
Exactly. Chapter 2 explicitly outlines what must happen before you are even allowed to undertake Desuma.
And what are those?
It says, live what you want before you do it. Love as you like before you do it. Make peace with your enemies before you do it.
Wow. Make peace with your enemies.
Yeah, it completely removes the option of running away. You cannot leave out of spite. You cannot leave because you are running from a conflict you are simply too scared to resolve.
That requirement to make peace with your enemies is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because, well, if you leave while you are still angry or resentful or holding a grudge, you haven't actually left.
Not at all.
You are carrying that entire system with you in your mind. The grievance becomes an anchor.
And the psychological mechanics of that are profound. Desuma is explicitly defined as a non-returnable journey from disempowerment to empowerment.
Okay.
It is the physical and spiritual act of walking away from what is familiar and comfortable because your personal evolution fundamentally demands a new environment.
Like you have exhausted the potential of your current reality.
Exactly. If you leave out of anger, you are still reacting to the old environment. You are still letting it dictate your actions. Desuma requires you to leave from a place of completion.
It makes me think of dismantling scaffolding.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you don't just kick the scaffolding down in a tantrum while the building is half finished. You carefully, systematically take it apart, piece by piece.
Acknowledging that it served a crucial purpose.
Right, but recognizing that the structure you've built can now stand on its own. You don't need those supports anymore.
Every step taken in Desuma is a step toward personal sovereignty. You are stepping away from being an instrument of someone else's system and stepping toward becoming the author of your own.
But the text warns that these changes will be terrifying, right?
Oh, terrifying. And that hesitating or trying to turn back actively blocks the insight that lies ahead. It demands solid, decisive action over mere intention.
So once you have dismantled that scaffolding and stepped out into the unknown, where are you actually trying to go?
Like, what's the destination?
Yeah. If Desuma is the journey, what is the destination for Zutun Barg?
Well, the destination is a state of being called Masdaqhood.
Masdaqhood, okay.
A Masdaq is the ultimate goal in this framework. It refers to someone who has attained absolute power for their life.
But we need to be careful here, right? Because this is not power over others in a tyrannical, dominating sense.
No, not at all. It is the power to be a sovereign over your own judgment, to apply wisdom to your life completely free from external manipulation.
To be the absolute ruler of your own mind.
Precisely. And the text breaks down exactly how to attain this Masdaqhood, providing a core triad of teachings.
Let's unpack the triad.
Sure. So the first one ties directly into the mechanics of Daisuma we just talked about. The first core teaching is the psychological acceptance of the non-returnable journey.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning once you step out of powerlessness, you cannot allow yourself to believe you are powerless again. The text argues that if you want power, the mere belief that you don't have it will instantly strip it away from you.
So reverting to old victimhood beliefs undoes the journey.
Yes. It is a psychological point of no return. You have to accept the mantle of your own agency, even when it is heavy.
Accepting that agency brings up a huge operational challenge, which leads to the second pillar of the triad: constant evolutionary change.
Right. The text says that Masdaqs must evolve from year to year. With every new experience comes a newer plane of existence.
But it doesn't describe this as a peaceful, relaxing process, does it?
Not even slightly. It literally says this evolution will feel blasphemous to what came before.
That specific word choice, blasphemous, is brilliant. Because we often get sold this idea in modern culture that personal growth is this like peaceful, linear, spa-like path of self-discovery.
Yeah, just good vibes and easy breakthroughs.
Exactly. But the Book of Masdaq argues that true growth requires tearing down the sacred cows of your former identity. Your own growth will feel shocking to the person you used to be. Expect defiance. Expect rebellion within yourself.
Think about how that actually plays out for someone listening to this. Let's say you spent 10 years building a career in a field that your parents praised, that your friends respected, and that paid you really well.
But deep down, it keeps you disempowered.
Right. Deciding to walk away from that, your Daisuma, and evolving into something new is going to feel like a betrayal.
It is going to feel blasphemous to the version of you that worked so hard to get that corner office.
How does a person survive that level of internal shock without just panicking and running back to the familiar?
Well, that is exactly why the third teaching of the triad is necessary. If you are constantly rebelling against your old self, you need a different navigation system.
You cannot use the same logic that built your old life to guide your new one.
Right. And this is the most radical concept of them all: the displacement of the mind. Masdaqhood demands that the mind no longer works as the king.
Okay, we need to really unpack the mechanics of this. Because telling a modern, hyper-educated person to dethrone their mind sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It really does.
What does the text actually mean by the mind, and what is supposed to replace it?
So, in this framework, the mind represents the analytical, calculating, worrying part of us.
The overthinker.
Yes, the part that obsesses over historical data, fears the future, and tries to control every possible variable. The text argues that the mind is a useful tool, but it should never be the sovereign.
So what replaces it?
To achieve Masdaqhood, the mind must be displaced by a deeper divine intuition, which the text refers to as shaddle or God.
But how do you practically distinguish between the two? Because, anxiety can often disguise itself as intuition.
Oh, all the time.
Right. You get a bad feeling about a job offer, and it's really hard to tell if that's your deep intuition warning you or just your anxious mind terrified of a new commute.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And the distinction lies in the mechanism of how they operate. Like when the mind is king, it operates on loops.
Loops. Okay, explain that.
It calculates, it hesitates, it lists pros and cons over and over, and it fundamentally operates on fear of what it cannot control. It is noisy.
And intuition.
Shaddle, or divine intuition, operates on clarity and presence. It is quiet, immediate, and does not require a spreadsheet of historical data to know what the next right step is.
That makes a lot of sense. The true sovereign has access to the mind. They can still use it to balance a checkbook or plan a schedule, but the mind is subject to the power of intuition, not the other way around.
And there is this incredible visual representation of this dynamic in the text.
Oh, the crowns.
Yes. When Zutun Barg eventually reaches the country of Kalsia, he meets their kings, who are called the Madeks. That is actually where the word Masdaq comes from.
Right.
These Madeks wear crowns that look like turbans, and right in the center, resting on their foreheads, they were a single amethyst.
And the text explains that this amethyst represents their absolute reliance on intuition to replace the mind.
It's like switching a plane from manual pilot to an advanced cosmic autopilot.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. When you are flying on manual, your anxious, calculating mind is just white-knuckling the controls.
Overthinking every single cloud.
Exactly. Terrified of crashing. Displacing the mind means switching over to the autopilot of pure intuition.
So the mind is still there.
Yeah, it's still sitting in the cockpit. It can read the altitude dials and check the fuel, but it's no longer flying the plane.
We live in an era of unprecedented information overload. We trap ourselves in analysis paralysis, constantly trying to predict outcomes that are completely out of our hands.
Dethroning the mind is the only way to survive the shock of constant evolutionary change.
If you try to logic your way through a blasphemous personal transformation, your mind will talk you out of it every single time.
Because the mind prefers the safety of the known over the freedom of the unknown.
But that raises a really massive practical problem. I am looking at this from the perspective of someone listening right now who has a mortgage, a job title, a family, and maybe a political affiliation they care deeply about.
Sure.
How on earth do you actually function in normal society if you're supposed to be this constantly evolving, intuitively driven Masdaq? We live in a world of rules and labels. You can't just float through the grocery store on pure cosmic intuition.
The text provides a brilliant architectural solution to that exact friction. It introduces a vital distinction between two distinct layers of existence.
Okay, let's unpack those.
They're called Adharna and Menzabit.
Adharna and Menzabit, right? So what is the mechanism behind Adharna?
So Adharna refers to the temporary experience. It encompasses all our worldly identities and affiliations.
Like your specific religion, your political leanings, your cultural habits, your social class, your job title.
Exactly.
Right.
And the text doesn't claim these things are evil or that you should abandon them. In fact, it argues they are incredibly useful vehicles.
They are schools for learning discipline, empathy, and social cohesion.
But, and this is the crucial boundary, they are not the ultimate cosmic truth. They are just the clothes you are wearing for this specific climate.
So Adharna is the temporary vehicle, which brings us to Menzabit.
Right. Menzabit is the ultimate submission to your true cosmic identity. It is the recognition that beneath all the labels, beneath the uniform you wear to work, or the cultural traditions you practice, you are fundamentally a Masdaq.
You are a sovereign leader connected directly to the divine intuition. Menzabit is the anchor.
I can hear a potential objection from a listener here, though.
What's that?
Well, if we treat all our worldly identities, our passions, our deeply held community ties, or a career we've put our heart into as just Adharna, just temporary experiences, doesn't that risk slipping into toxic positivity?
Oh, so?
Like if I just got laid off from a job I loved and someone tells me, hey, don't worry, that was just Adharna, it wasn't the real you, that feels incredibly dismissive. Does this framework make life feel like we're just walking around wearing fake costumes, never truly committing to anything?
It is a vital question, and the text actually addresses the danger of taking these identities too seriously by contrasting two very different leaders that Zutun Barg encounters.
Tell us about them.
First, you have the tyrant of Wasaga, known as the Tiger Harmo Azami. The tiger is a ruler who completely confuses Adharna with ultimate truth.
He takes the temporary label as absolute.
Exactly. He forces everyone in his realm to adopt his exact religious identity, his exact interpretation of reality. And because he believes his temporary label is the absolute cosmic law, he rules with an iron fist.
He persecutes anyone who is different,
causing massive bloodshed, like the tragic massacre at the town of Humor.
So he is basically the fantasy equivalent of a highly insecure, toxic boss.
Or like a dictator who demands absolute ideological conformity.
Yeah, exactly. He takes the temporary label and makes it lethal.
Because he has no connection to Menzabit. Now contrast the tiger with the Mezek of Kelsia, King Ihram Sabak, who Zutun Barg meets later.
The guy with the amethyst crown.
That's the one. The Medek is the ruler of a bustling, enterprising, highly diverse nation. His palace is tiny and humble. He leads through absolute compassion.
He understands the fundamental distinction between Adharna and Menzabit.
He allows his people to practice their own diverse religions and cultural habits, their own Adharnas, peacefully, side by side. He doesn't need to force his labels onto them because he knows the ultimate truth, Menzabit, transcends those temporary differences.
He doesn't derive his worth from the costume, so he doesn't need to force you to wear it too.
The text literally quotes the Medek explaining his philosophy. He says, if you want life, give others theirs.
Wow. If you want life, give others theirs.
That completely shifts the perspective. The tyrant who is insecure in his power takes life to enforce his labels. The true sovereign, secure in their Masdaqhood, gives others the freedom to experience their own lives.
So, regarding the pushback about toxic positivity, knowing your job is just Autherna doesn't mean you don't care about it. It means you can wear the costume of your career fully and pour your passion into it precisely because you know that if you lose it, you don't lose yourself.
It creates a supreme emotional resilience. When your political party loses, or you lose your job, or your social status changes, you don't shatter into a million pieces.
You allow yourself to grieve the loss of the experience, but you recognize that an Autherna have ended. Your menzabit, your core sovereignty, remains completely untouched.
It is such an elegant philosophy. It allows you to participate in the messy reality of human society without being consumed by it.
And up until this point in our deep dive, we have been treating the Autherens, the history of Chalcea, and the journey of Zutun Barg as an ancient esoteric mythology, something passed down through generations.
Right.
But your sources reveal a shocking, absolute, fourth wall breaking twist in chapter 35.
This is where the entire context of the text flips on its head. Chapter 35 reveals the origin of the Autherens.
Break it down for us.
So this intricately detailed alternative universe, with its continents, its theological debates, its wars, its tyrants, and its sages, was actually created by an 11-year-old boy.
His name is Johann Kassim, and he wasn't some ancient mystic. He was a child playing in the front garden of his home in Borneo.
Johann was facing the awkward, often traumatic transition into puberty and adulthood. Furthermore, he was navigating the immense pressures of an autistic mind in a world that demanded rigid conformity.
The real world felt overwhelmingly chaotic and hostile.
So he created the Autherens as a secret haven. He built this entire perfectly regulated universe to process reality.
The details of this are just staggering. The epic locations of this sweeping narrative were actually just physical parts of his yard.
Right, like the grand city of Johannazar, where these massive political debates took place. It was literally just a mound of dirt near the boundary of his garden.
Wow. That is unbelievable.
And the eastern territory of Katrinaho. That was the drain where he used to play.
So he literally mapped a universe of spiritual sovereignty over a patch of dirt and pebbles.
A neurodivergent child's coping mechanism to survive a rigid world evolved into a profound philosophical treatise on how to survive the human experience.
It is an astonishing meta-revelation. And the author, Johann, steps directly into the text at this point to address the reader face-to-face. He asks a critical question: can I be real in a false universe?
Does knowing that this entire world is the invention of a child in a garden diminish the power of the teachings we just discussed?
For me, it amplifies it 1,000 times over. It takes it from abstract, floaty mythology and grounds it in raw human survival. It proves that the framework actually works.
The author explicitly states his thesis here. He says, Masdaqhood is the ability to be real in a false universe.
Think about how profoundly that applies to us. Whether you are navigating the imaginary high-stakes politics of the Chalcean continent, or you are navigating the very real, often absurd, and highly pressurized rules of modern human society, the spiritual requirements remain exactly the same.
You still have to figure out how to be authentic when the world around you feels artificial and demanding.
So let's bring all of this together. We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with Desuma, the realization that true empowerment requires dismantling the scaffolding of what keeps you powerless, making peace with your past before you step into the unknown.
And we explored the core triad. Accepting that the journey is non-returnable, embracing the shock of constant evolution even when it feels rebellious.
And dethroning the anxious, calculating mind to place the amethyst crown of intuition in charge.
Plus, we learned to distinguish between the temporary label society assigns us, our Autherna, and our ultimate sovereign cosmic identity, our menzabit.
You don't need to live in the Autherens to apply this. Every single day, the world wants to assign you labels, corporate labels, political labels, social labels.
It demands that you treat those temporary experiences as your ultimate reality, much like the tiger of the saga demands conformity.
But this text reminds you that you are none of those labels. Beneath it all, you are a Masdaq. You are the sovereign of your own judgment.
The map might be of an imaginary continent built over a garden drain in Borneo, but the coordinates lead straight back to the center of your own mind.
I love that. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on the core triad we discussed. The text warns us that true evolution will feel blasphemous to the person you used to be. It demands defiance against your comfort zones.
So true.
So look at your life right now. Look at your beliefs, your habits, your comforts. If your next step forward doesn't feel at least a little bit rebellious against your past self, are you actually evolving, or are you just walking in circles? Welcome to your Dizuma.